Long ago, in the time when stories were told by the fire and the wind carried whispers of forgotten gods, there was a kingdom named Obaya. It was a land of rolling green hills, thick forests humming with life, and rivers that curved like serpents across the earth. The people of Obaya were proud and rooted, tied to their land and their traditions like the great baobab trees that dotted the landscape. Every life, every marriage, every death was recorded in song and story, passed from mouth to ear for generations. One day, the skies dimmed in the middle of the afternoon. A great hush fell over the kingdom. The sun, bold and unyielding, was slowly consumed by the moon, casting shadows where there should have been light. It was an eclipse, a rare one that the oldest elders could barely remember witnessing in their youth. The birds went silent, the animals took shelter, and the people knelt in prayer, wondering what omen this strange sky might bring. In a modest hut on the edge of Abaya's northern hills, a child was born at that exact moment. His mother, Akili, was a quiet woman who spoke to the moon each night and carried wisdom in her eyes. His father had vanished months before, a traveler swallowed by the forest and never seen again. Alone, Akili gave birth to the boy as the village midwives stood in awe, glancing nervously at the sky. They named him Ngoma, meaning drum, for they said his heartbeat echoed louder than any infant's they had ever heard, steady and sure, like the beat of an ancestral song. From the moment he opened his eyes, Ngoma was different. He did not cry loudly or squirm as other babies did. His gaze, deep and unwavering, seemed to settle on things unseen. The village elder, a woman known as Mother Bisi, was called to see the child. She examined him closely, then placed a small mark of ash on his forehead. She told the others that the eclipse had marked him for a path beyond the ordinary, that Ngoma would not follow the desires of flesh nor the rhythms of marriage. The villagers murmured in confusion, unsure what such a fate could mean for a child not yet weaned. As Ngoma grew, his nature became even more apparent. While the other children ran wild through the fields, laughing and tumbling in the dust, Ngoma often wandered off on his own. He would sit beside the river for hours, watching the water move and listening to the wind rustling through the grass. He never seemed lonely. When spoken to, he would answer with calm precision, as if his thoughts had already traveled far ahead. He had little interest in games or mischief, but he knew every plant and bird by name, and animals approached him without fear. By the age of 10, Ngoma was already assisting the elders with their duties. He prepared healing salves from tree bark, lit fires with a single spark, and could find clean water even in the dry seasons. He became especially close to Mother Bisi, who took him as her spiritual apprentice. From her, he learned the deeper meanings of silence, of patience, of listening not just with ears, but with the soul. The other children admired him, though they found him strange. He never joined in their teasing or their songs about lovers. As they grew older and began to sneak glances at one another, curious about the blossoming of love and desire, Ngoma remained still. The girls noticed him, of course, tall, graceful, with eyes like dark honey. They whispered about him during moonlight gatherings, wondering who he would choose, imagining what it would be like to be loved by someone so serene. But Ngoma chose no one. At first, the villagers thought he was shy. They encouraged the girls to approach him, and a few did, offering gifts or weaving charms in his name. He accepted these kindly, even gratefully, but his eyes never held the hunger they hoped to see. He treated everyone with warmth, but no one with special attention, and so the whispers began. Some said he had suffered a heartbreak in silence, others claimed his mother had cursed him. A few believed he was not fully human, that the eclipse had made him part spirit. Yet despite these rumors, no one turned him away. Ngoma never disrespected anyone, nor did he isolate himself from the community. He attended weddings, danced at festivals, and sat with grieving families during funerals. He simply walked his path quietly, like a drumbeat in the background of the village's life, steady, constant, and never seeking center stage. In time, even the most curious among the villagers grew to accept that Ngoma was simply as he was. He was not cruel or broken. He simply did not desire what others did. He loved in his own way, through service, through care, through stillness. He helped raise the younger children, weaving them toys from reeds and telling them stories beneath the trees. He carried water for the elderly and gathered herbs at dawn before others woke. By the time he reached manhood, the village had stopped asking when he would marry. It was understood, though never fully spoken, that Ngoma belonged to everyone, and to no one. He was a part of the village, but not bound by it. His life moved with a rhythm all his own, and the people began to see this not as something to be pitied, but something to be respected. And so Ngoma grew into adulthood beneath the same quiet skies that had watched over his birth. The boy born during the eclipse had begun to shine in his own way, not like the burning sun of passion, nor the soft glow of a shared hearth, but like the steady moonlight that touches all, needing no flame to be felt. Ngoma's passage into manhood came as quietly and naturally as the turning of the seasons. While the sons of Obaya were tested in the hunt, trained in war dances, and initiated through the rites of adulthood, Ngoma walked a quieter path. He learned to read the sky by its changing colors and could sense the coming of storms by the flight of birds. When others sought glory or adventure, he sought understanding. He became known not just as a healer, but as a man of peace, a figure whose presence calmed quarrels and whose words often ended disputes before they began. Despite the pride of his people in his wisdom, there was one subject that clung to him like morning mist to the mountain: his solitude. By his late 20s, Ngoma had never courted anyone, never spoken with longing about another, and never showed any stirrings of romantic or physical desire. This stood in contrast to the vibrant courtships of Obaya, where love was celebrated openly with dances, feasts, and the exchange of hand-woven bracelets between those who chose each other. Women admired Ngoma not only for his serene nature, but for the way he treated every living thing with attention, care, and respect. Many believed that once the right woman came, he would open like a closed bud touched by sunlight. But season after season passed, and the bud remained still. A girl named Abeni, known for her radiant laughter and fierce intelligence, once asked Ngoma for help with her sick younger brother. Over the following months, she visited often, bringing baskets of fruit, handmade trinkets, and quiet hope. Her eyes lingered on him longer than custom allowed, and her gestures grew softer, more intimate. But Ngoma treated her as he treated everyone, with warmth but without desire. Eventually, Abeni, like others before her, moved on, marrying a trader from the southern region. Her heart carried no bitterness, only a quiet ache that faded with time. She later told her daughters stories of Ngoma, describing him not as a lost love, but as a man too full of the world to ever be claimed by one heart. The elders, though respectful of Ngoma, sometimes debated his path in hushed circles. In Obaya, marriage and children were not just personal choices. They were seen as essential threads in the communal tapestry. A man without a wife, without children, was often viewed as someone who had not completed the circle of life. But Ngoma's life defied their expectations in ways that couldn't be ignored. Though he remained unmarried, he was deeply woven into the community. He mentored fatherless boys, guided young women through rites of womanhood when their mothers had passed, and sat vigil with the dying so they would not leave the world alone. In this way, Noma became a father of sorts to the village itself. He tended to the sick with an intuition that often surpassed even the oldest healers. He knew how to bring a fever down with steam from crushed eucalyptus, and when to silence a room so a spirit could pass gently. He taught the children of Obaya not only how to care for the land, but how to listen to themselves, to each other, and to the silence between moments. One year, a great drought struck the region. Crops withered, and the rivers thinned to mere trickles. Fear grew in the hearts of the people, and disputes over water began to splinter the community. Families that had shared meals for generations suddenly looked at each other with suspicion. Ngoma became the bridge between clans. He organized a communal well-digging effort, guiding men from rival lineages to work side by side. He found edible roots buried deep beneath the drying earth and showed mothers how to stretch what little they had into nourishing meals. Through this difficult time, he became more than a healer. He became a lifeline. When the rains finally returned, people gathered not only to thank the gods, but to honor Ngoma. They offered him land, riches, even a hand in marriage from the most revered family. But Ngoma declined all of it. He accepted only a carved walking stick made by the village's oldest woodworker, a simple gift, yet one he carried with pride. As the years continued, Ngoma aged gracefully. His hair grew silver and fine lines appeared around his eyes, but his posture remained proud and his spirit unwavering. Children still flocked to him, women still admired him, and the men of Obaya, once uncertain about his life choices, came to him for counsel, not just as a healer, but as a wise man whose path, though different, was undeniably rich. No longer did the people whisper about his lack of a wife. Instead, they spoke of how his hands had steadied the village through hardship, how his eyes had seen through storms, and how his presence alone made even the most troubled soul feel anchored. But Ngoma never explained his path, never offered a reason for his celibacy or his solitude. Some believed he had been called by the spirits. Others thought he had given his body in service to the ancestors, who demanded discipline. A few believed he simply had no need for what others called love because his heart already carried the weight of many. Though he never said it, Ngoma understood something deep and ancient, that love does not always wear the face of desire. Sometimes it is in the way one listens, in the way one gives without asking, in the way one walks through the world with open hands and a quiet heart. In this way, Ngoma chose a path, not out of rejection, but from deep knowing. He did not see himself as missing something. He saw his life as whole, a quiet river that flowed gently through a village that would one day tell his story, not with confusion, but with reverence. As Ngoma entered the later years of his life, he became a permanent fixture in the rhythm of the village, a presence as constant as the rising sun, as trusted as the flow of the river. His strength never faltered, though his steps grew slower and his hair had long since turned to the color of ash. He was neither old in spirit nor weary in purpose. Instead, he lived with the grace of one who had long made peace with his path. His hut, once simple and quiet, now buzzed daily with the hum of activity. People came not for ceremonies or spectacle, but for guidance, comfort, and presence. The sick found healing in his hands, the grieving found peace in his silence, and the lost, those who had wandered too far from their own hearts, found direction in his gaze. Children would gather each morning at his threshold, waiting for his stories. Ngoma never told tales of war or conquest. Instead, he spoke of trees that whispered, rivers that dreamed, and animals that remembered. His stories, like his life, were layered with quiet truths, teachings about patience, humility, and the many forms of love. Though Noma had no children of his own, few in Obaya had more sons and daughters of the spirit. Orphans often found their way to him, either led by fate or by the kind whispers of others. He taught them not only how to live, but how to belong to the land, to each other, to themselves. These children, when grown, became some of the village's most compassionate farmers, craftspeople, and leaders. They often credited Ngoma not for teaching them what to think, but for showing them how to listen. The village itself had changed over the decades. New chiefs had come and gone, marriages had flourished and failed, and the world beyond Obaya's hills had crept closer with traders and travelers, bringing stories of cities and machines. But Ngoma remained grounded in the old ways, not because he rejected change, but because he understood what should not be forgotten. He still lived simply, wore the same earth-toned robes, and spent his mornings walking the same path by the river. Birds followed him. The trees seemed to lean toward him as he passed. Even the wind carried his name gently through the reeds. Many of those who had once questioned his choices had long passed away. Their children, raised with stories of Ngoma's deeds and quiet strength, treated him with unspoken reverence. He had become more than a man to them. He was a symbol of endurance, of devotion, and of a love not defined by marriage or desire, but by care in its purest form. Still, there were moments when people wondered about the fullness of his life. Some of the younger ones, curious and bold, would whisper among themselves, "Did he ever long for a partner? Did he ever wonder what it might be like to be held in another's arms?" Did he ever feel the pull of flesh, the ache of loneliness? But Ngoma never spoke of longing, and if he carried such feelings, he buried them beneath layers of purpose and peace. Instead, he poured all his energy into the village. He mediated conflicts not with authority, but with patience. He taught others how to recognize not just their needs, but the needs of those around them. He cultivated gardens that fed many mouths and wove baskets so finely that they were set to hold even the smallest seed without losing it. In his later years, Ngoma began creating a book, not with paper or ink, but with carved wood and stone. On smooth slabs and tree bark, he etched symbols and patterns that told the history of Obaya through his eyes. Each symbol, drawn with care, represented a moment, a birth, a fire, a reunion, a healing. This was his gift to the future, a way for those yet unborn to know not just what had happened, but how it had been felt. As his 100th year approached, the village began preparations for a celebration, not just a birthday, but a commemoration of a life lived fully and without compromise. They planned to gather beneath the baobab tree where Ngoma often sat, sharing stories and food beneath its massive limbs. On the eve of the celebration, Ngoma walked the village alone. He moved slowly, pausing at every familiar corner, placing his hands on doorposts, trees, and stones. He visited the graves of friends, whispered to the river, and touched the earth with bare feet. It was a farewell not of sorrow, but of gratitude. That night, the sky was unusually clear, stars pulsed above like the heartbeat of the universe, and the moon, almost full, bathed everything in a soft silver light. Ngoma slept with the calm of a man who had poured out everything he had been given. The next morning, the villagers came with drums and laughter, children dancing ahead of the adults, hands full of flowers and bundles of fruit. They reached Noma's hut and called his name gently, not wishing to wake him with noise. But inside, they found him still. Ngoma had passed in his sleep, lying peacefully with a half-smile on his face, his carved staff resting beside him. There were no cries of despair, no wailing, only silence, deep and reverent. The kind of silence that arrives not with death, but with the completion of something whole. The villagers buried him beneath the baobab tree, the oldest and tallest in Obaya, and as they laid him to rest, a great wind stirred. Flowers bloomed suddenly around the roots, and the branches above seemed to stretch toward the heavens in salute. In the days that followed, people continued to visit his hut, to sit under the baobab to read the carved histories Ngoma had left behind. His presence lingered, not as a ghost, but as an echo in the very soil. They no longer asked why he had never taken a wife, why he had lived without a partner, without a lover. They understood now, in a way, that needed no words. He had loved differently, fully, quietly, completely. After Ngoma's passing, Obaya stood still, not in mourning alone, but in awe. It was not often a soul like his walked the earth. The celebration that had been prepared for his 100th year transformed into a gathering of remembrance. No tears fell from the skies that day, but the wind carried the weight of memory across the village, and the earth beneath their feet felt warmer than usual, as if Ngoma had left some of his essence behind. They buried him at the foot of the great baobab tree, the one where he had sat each morning, where he had told stories and watched the seasons roll past like clouds. It was said that as his body returned to the soil, the tree seemed to grow taller. Its roots spread wider. A flock of birds circled the branches and did not fly away until the last handful of earth had covered him. For days after, the village was quiet. Not because it was empty of laughter, but because people were listening more to each other, to the wind, to their own thoughts. Ngoma's absence had made space for reflection, and his presence lingered in the pause between one moment and the next. Children no longer ran past his hut. Instead, they sat beneath the baobab tree and told each other the stories he once told them. They repeated them word for word as he had said them, without change, without rush. It was their way of keeping him alive, of honoring the man who had shaped them with gentleness and truth. The symbols Ngoma had carved into wood and stone became sacred. The elders gathered them and arranged them carefully in the village square, preserving its visual language so that generations to come could read the history not only of events, but of feeling, of loss, resilience, and love. His way of marking time became part of Obaya's tradition. Every birth, every planting season, every festival now had a symbol adhered to the wall, drawn in Noma's style. His hut, though small and simple, was preserved and kept clean. No one lived there, yet every day, someone came to sweep his floor or lay a flower at the entrance. Some claimed to feel his spirit near when they stepped inside, not as a ghost, but as a breath of wind or the sudden warmth of sunlight through the thatch roof. As the months passed, stories of Ngoma traveled beyond Obaya. Traders carried his name along with their spices and fabrics, and soon, neighboring villages knew of the man who had lived a full century without a lover, without a spouse, without a single child of his own, yet had left behind a legacy of love richer than most could imagine. Some doubted these stories. Others called them exaggerations. How could a man go so long without the touch of another, without knowing desire or fulfilling it? In a world that often measured a man's worth by his lineage or his conquest, Noma's life seemed impossible. But those who had known him, those who had grown under his care, sat at his feet and heard the calm in his voice, knew that his story was not a tale of deprivation. It was a tale of choice, of clarity, and of a kind of richness that did not crave or consume. His was a life poured outward, not drawn inward. And though he walked without a companion, he had never walked alone. Years turned into decades. Children became elders. New faces came to Obaya, some seeking trade, some seeking stories. Among the tales told at fireside, Ngoma's name always returned. And whenever it was spoken, it brought a hush, a reverence reserved not for royalty or warriors, but for the rare souls who understand the deeper work of being alive. It is said that on the 100th anniversary of his birth, the sky once again dimmed in the middle of the day. The sun faded, not in rage or fear, but in soft surrender as the moon passed before it, casting the land in a gentle twilight. The people of Obaya looked up and remembered. They gathered once again beneath the baobab tree. No one called it a coincidence. They believed the eclipse had come to honor him, just as it had on the day of his arrival in the world. The circle had closed. The rhythm had returned. In that moment, as shadows danced across the earth and the wind stirred the trees' great limbs, no one asked questions about Ngoma's choices. They did not wonder what he had missed or what he had denied himself. They understood that he had simply followed a different calling, one not ruled by desire or union, but by deep, unrelenting care. Today, when the elders of Obaya teach the young about love, they do not speak only of marriage or passion. They speak of Ngoma, the man who walked alone but touched every soul. They say his love was like water, clear, quiet, and essential, not meant to be held, but to be felt in everything it nourished. And so the story lives on.